conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, we'll be touching on something I started talking about yesterday about some shuffling going on in the leadership up in the state Senate. We'll talk a little bit about that, kind of finish out some thoughts I had yesterday that I didn't quite get to. Obviously, it is Pride Month and it is Pride Restaurant Week, which leaves me wondering about the actions of one particular company on the list, something odd decision they made. We'll be talking about that. And then finally, Louisville Schools, Jefferson County Public Schools, says they're investing a lot of money into a sports program. I'll play for you exactly what they had to say, and we'll discuss about whether or not it's a smart idea. So we'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before I dig down into it, if you want to reach out to the show, feel free to email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. And before I get to the bigger stories that I just talked about, I do want to talk real quick just about something I found interesting. Recently, Thomas Massie, obviously a congressman from here in Kentucky, so it does deal with Kentucky politics, was on Tucker Carlson, and they were discussing just a wide range of things. And, you know, Thomas Massie has a lot of candor, and he's very honest. And I know when I talk to people who are not as politically involved, or when I start discussing politics about this happening and that happening, and they didn't want it to pass, or they did want it to pass, people start to wonder about what pull do they have on people? What is this that they're holding over others? And leading up into this discussion, Tucker Carlson was talking about, you know, is it that they have some sort of, blackmail on people like Mike Johnson, or what drives congressmen to vote the way they do? What makes them go bad? And this is what Thomas Massie had to say. Let's take a listen to that.
Better be liked. And so it's almost like kindergarten when somebody says, I won't be your friend anymore if you don't, give me your lunch. Congressmen fall for that. They're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and they fall for that.
It's interesting. You like people. I've asked around. You don't seem to have any real enemies in the Congress. I don't even think AIPAC hates you. They just want you to obey. But they don't, it doesn't seem personal.
Right.
You don't seem to be at personal war with anybody. That's my take on it.
I have a mutation.
So you like people, okay? Obviously, you're not some weird autist who doesn't care about other people. You like other people.
I love people.
I can tell. And your colleagues say that. But you also don't feel like you need to fit in at the same time. Like, what is that? It's
a mutation. That chromosome, the liking people and likability chromosome usually has another gene on it right next to it, which is the need to be liked. And I'm missing the need to be liked gene. I don't know what happened.
I appreciate what he was saying. I got to disagree a little bit with Thomas Massie. His point is true. They go bad because they want to be liked. They want to be liked by these people that are sitting next to them all day long, that DC's lonely. This happens in Frankfurt all the time, especially for those traveling in. If your state house rep or state senator stays in Frankfurt overnight because they're just too far away, they can't drive every time, the likelihood they go bad is significantly more, especially if they really haven't accomplished a lot in life. And we see this every year with new legislators coming in. Every year when new legislators come in, assuming there's a big switchover, a fair amount of new ones come in, you see this weird kind of change up of people who start out super conservative and end up becoming very moderate, and definitely go against what they originally said they would do. And it's because they get surrounded by the establishment people who just are like in the lobbyists and other things, and they want to get along with them. If you're stuck up in Frankfurt and you don't get along with the lobbyists and you don't get along with the, your colleagues as much because you won't vote for their bill, well, they don't invite you out to the bars afterwards, and they don't invite you to the parties that they have. And so those who don't go bad are those who don't care as much what their peers think of them. They like people, they're friendly, they like talking to people, but they don't necessarily care. They don't find their value from others' opinions. And that's the key thing. And that's the thing that I don't think it's a gene. I think what you look for when you find these independent voters and you look at them, you see that one, they are themselves very accomplished before they got into politics. They did not make a career out of politics. They didn't get, degrees in political science and then go intern for this congressman while getting their law degree and then go work at this very political firm as like a assistant lobbyist to get to know these people and then go work on this person's staff and in this campaign. And then eventually they run for office themselves. That's what we see with people like Andy Barr, for an example. That's the kind of path he took, or work their way up through different political positions. Thomas Massie, why he has a thing where he doesn't need to find value from there. One, he's got kids and a wife who, obviously love him very much and he loves them very much. And he finds value from being a father. He finds value from being a Christian. He finds value from his creator. And he also himself has accomplished a lot. Him and his wife both went to MIT. They founded a successful company. They sold the company. He basically funded his own entire campaigns and he was essentially forced to run for office. What ended up happening was he was just trying to build his house and the local county started passing these ordinances. Him and a bunch of neighbors stood up against it. And then when the judge executive seat came up for election, he was asked by other people to run for it. Thomas Massie runs for it. He wins that. And then when Congress came up, he was asked to run for that. So he went ahead and ran for it. But it wasn't about him needing to feel special or powerful because he's a congressman. That's not it at all. He already was successful. And when one day he doesn't be a congressman, he doesn't care. And he doesn't care what his colleagues up there think about him because he has friends. He didn't go up there to make friends. And you see this with a few reps where they are themselves accomplished. They were accomplished before politics and they do very good. Compare that, though, to the other kind of power-seeking people that really just made their way up through politics. And not to pick on Andy Barr, but to pick on Andy Barr. And part of the reason why we talk about Andy Barr, too, in this situation is because I think Andy Barr's made it pretty clear that he wants to run for that Senate position for when Mitch McConnell steps down in 2026. And that's an interesting point because the question would be, why are you, Andy Barr, even running for that position? Why would you want to be a senator? Andy Barr could be a congressman the rest of his life. He would never have to really battle for re-election, of course, in the primary. He's in a pretty safe red district now with redistricting. Possibly, maybe it could get bluer over time, but he'd be pretty safe. And it's not as if a senator pays a lot more than being, of course, a congressman does. And it's a lot bigger job because instead of just worrying about one district, you got to travel the state a whole lot more. Right now, you just have to travel within your congressional district. And so the reasoning to want to run for Senate is not there outside of just you want to, if you're already a congressman, you want to feel more special up on Capitol Hill. Because being one of 100 is a lot more special than being one of 435. And you want to feel special. That was the entire reason why you ran in the first place. You want to feel special. And you certainly see this too. You can see this with Frankfurt reps all the time, where, as I call it, they care more about getting their claps back home than they care about actually accomplishing anything. They care more about getting to be in office than doing something with that office, especially if they ran for it several times before they got it. They never had any policy. They never felt called to it, per se, just because they had something great to add to it. I mean, when you're talking to somebody and you ask them, why did you decide to run for office? And if they can't sit there and give you a personal story about government affecting them or something along those lines, they just really believe, my favorite story you'll get is that, I just want to give back. The world's given me so much, I want to give back. Like it's giving back for you to go up and make laws to rule the rest of us. Like, how full of yourself do you have to be to believe that you are just so accomplished and so amazing that your way of public service is getting to lord over the rest of us? I think that's something we need to remember when we're deciding who we want to go ahead and support. Well, coming up after this, we'll be digging into, I'll talk a little bit on subject I ended on yesterday. And dig into a few more things. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Andrew back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So yesterday we had talked about Senator Bledsoe and how some members of the establishment, like Thayer, and others, especially in the Senate, were really trying to boost her up. They're trying to make her get a little bit more attention, calling her the notorious A and B, Amanda Mays Bledsoe, acting like, what was it was a good comment, but, a pretty good comment. Don't get me wrong on that. Trying to make that though into like, this is something Amanda Mays Bledsoe does all the time, calling her notorious. That's just not the case. And I talked a little bit about why. And it's important to understand there's a shuffle going on within our state Senate leadership. There is obviously he's stepped down, so that leaves that floor leader position open. He's made it pretty clear he wants Julie Rocky Adams to come over to be Senate floor leader. And then I'm sure they want Amanda Mays Bledsoe to take over some position within leadership. And some people may wonder, well, why would they want Amanda Mays Bledsoe to do it? She's pretty new as far as it all goes. So there's a few reasons why. One, Amanda, her husband is well known in politics. I believe he's a DC lobbyist. And so that can certainly help bring some money into the caucus because it is about fundraising. A large part of most of how leadership is decided is you got to be a good fundraiser. That's a big part of it. And the other thing too, and like it or not, Republicans play identity politics, despite the fact it never works out for them. Republicans play identity politics more than Democrats ever do. Republicans sit there and believe that, if we want to make inroads with the black vote, or if we want to make inroads with the Latino vote, or inroads with the women vote, or blah, 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 we need to have a woman or black Republican or Latino Republican or a woman Republican. We need to have them run in order to pull those seats. We need to be more diverse than the Democrat caucus. And once again, not to pick on Andy Barr. I just hear him talk all the time because obviously I live in the 6th district. Andy Barr will talk about this regularly, where he talks about how many more women and minorities they're getting into their congressional caucus and how amazing that is. Not that they're conservative or passing anything great, but just the fact that they're a woman or a minority is somehow in and of itself an amazing thing. And it's because they believe that this is how they're going to make inroads into these liberal areas. They believe that, we're not winning elections because the general population in our liberal population views us as racist or as sexist. And so if we go ahead and just have a woman run or have a black person run, they won't view us that way anymore. But that's ignoring the fact that they don't actually think you are racist or sexist. Like if you ask your average person out there, average liberal out there, is Donald Trump racist? And they're like, yeah, I believe he's racist. And then you ask them specifically, what has Donald Trump said that makes him a racist? They have nothing to tell you. They have nothing to share with you on that topic because they don't actually know. All they know is that talking heads have told them that. And so because they don't actually believe that you're racist, they just know that the talking heads have told them that you're racist. They don't have examples for you, the average liberal citizen. Well, just because you put forward a black candidate isn't going to change their mind. No, in fact, the liberals will just go ahead and tell them you're still super duper uber racist. And in fact, funny enough, they'll use like they did with Daniel Cameron, where they went after him with one of the most racist things ever, calling him an Uncle Tom, saying that he was a race traitor. They literally called him that in an ad. And of course, this is a young black guy running against a white guy, a straight white guy, supposedly straight, but straight white guy. And yet they sided with the straight white guy because it was about politics, not about race. And it never was. And so this belief by them is ridiculous. But with that in mind, why are they pushing Amanda Mays Bledsoe, though, with these kinds of comments? Well, they want a woman up there, even though they already have Julie Rocky Adams, but they're moving her over. They want to make sure that a woman ends up taking over. But when they look at their current women's caucus, Adrienne Southworth just lost re-election, something they did to her in leadership. They want to get rid of her. You have Lindsay Tishner, but Lindsay Tishner's too conservative for them. She pushes too hard on the strong things. She's also gets her own acolytes. She's a rising star in and of her own right, more than Amanda Mays Bledsoe is. In my opinion, I hear more people talking about what Lindsay Tishner's doing in the legislature than Amanda Mays Bledsoe. I mean, as I sit right now, outside of some bill dealing with private schools, and I don't know if she passed it last session, I don't even know for a fact if she passed it. I just know she put forward a bill that would allow private schools to operate under the same rules of public schools on something to do with attendance. Outside of that, I cannot, out of the legislation I talk about, and those of you who've listened to the show for a long time know, I talk about a lot of bills, a lot of legislation. I dig into a lot of things. I cannot think of one single solitary bill that Amanda Mays Bledsoe is the key sponsor on that she passed that was particularly impactful, certainly to the things I care about. Things like lower spending, things like protecting our liberty, things like keeping a check on government. Those items, those things that I care about, I can't think of a single piece of legislation. And maybe you can think of one because she's passed something on something you care about. I don't know what that is. And so they're trying to get her into this leadership role, but I think she feels a little bit uncomfortable. It reminds me of the scene from Moneyball to kind of set this up. The main character, played by Brad Pitt, Billy Beane, his name, general manager of the Oakland A's, is he put together this team and he's trying to convince his coaching staff to put this one guy on first base. He ends up just telling him, but putting this one guy in first base that was priorly a catcher. They want him on first, and they say he's got no feel for it. Here, just listen to the scene here, and you'll kind of understand how this relates into what I'm talking about.
What do you think, Wash?
The nice way to say it is he lacks confidence.
Well, give him some.
I'll do that, Billy, but we got Pena who can play first. And he's looking mighty good out there.
You want to go with Hattie? We got 6 weeks.
Get down in it. There you go. There you go.
H.
That's what I'm talking about.
Picking machine.
It's only baseball.
So as you can hear there, he said, look, we got to give him confidence. And so when he does mundane things, and that's kind of what you heard at the end there, when he does mundane things like simply fielding a basic ball for the first base, they're sitting there clapping, picking machine, go, Scotty, woo, and cheering him on for these very simple basic things because it gives him more confidence to play the position. I believe the same thing's going on with Amanda Bledsoe, where they want another woman. She's the only woman they have to choose from. And they don't want to just tell her, look, we only want you because you're a woman. They want to convince her that she's super duper capable and she's super impactful. Maybe she is. Like I said, I just can't think of a single piece of legislation that's been super impactful that she's done or an issue she's really championed. And so when she's done something pretty mundane and they're going to put her out there in more of these positions and she does things that are pretty standard and normal, they're going to go ahead and cheer for her like they were just cheering for that baseball player to give him more confidence in playing first base. I think it's a pretty similar situation overall. So I just want to touch on that real quick. So Pride Month, Pride Week, Pride Restaurant Week's going on, Pride Month. And I think we maybe need to talk about why Pride Month is coming under so much scrutiny. Because if you rewind to let's say even 10 years ago, let's say, gay marriage was legal and they were still doing Pride festivals, but I can't remember it being as much of a electric thing, as much of a lightning rod of politics like it is now. And there's a big reason why. And it has to do with the fact, to be quite honest, is it more from being about gay people and bisexual and lesbian people just trying to say that they want to be treated the same, they want the same rights, straight people. Not that they had actually different rights, because, I also couldn't marry a man. The difference was I just didn't want to, right? And so to claim it's a rights issue when we're actually all being treated the same is kind of odd. But at the same time, okay, putting that argument to the side, I think most moderate people bought into the argument of, they just want to get married, let it be. And then when that happened, they had their pride parades. They're like, they just want to fit in and belong. It's really not a big deal, so on and so forth. But the problem has become is that through the entire rest of the year now, you see this LGBTQ push, this pride push, because it's not actually about lesbian, gay, bisexual anymore. It's about a leftist ideology. It's about destroying, it's moved from being just gay people to now being people attempting to achieve communistic ends of destroying the American way of life. And it got real heated too when you started dragging kids into this. That's how it started getting really, really testy. Because when you start dragging kids to things like seeing, dudes dancing around in thongs, something that, at the 4th of July parade in Lexington, I had my son at it. And the pride float comes by and had dudes in thongs dancing around, naked people, right? You start dragging kids to what is clearly sexual performances in drag shows. Those types of things start to go on and people get upset. So people were pretty much fine with it until it was shoving it down your throat. We don't just want to be tolerated. We need to be celebrated. It stopped being a tolerance month and started being a celebrate us is better than you month because we're somehow so much better than all of you living your little mundane lives. What we're living is an amazing life. We're better than all of you. We need our own month to celebrate it. So it's moved from that to this. And then on top of that, you throw into the fact you start dragging kids into it, inappropriate behavior. It isn't just leave me alone. It's I want to drag you kicking and screaming into my celebration. Of course, the corporate interests started getting involved and it really started to cause a lot of consternation. Well, there's a restaurant week going on. We'll talk about who's participating after this short break. You're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And you're back on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. For the break, we're digging into Pride Month, obviously, talking about why it's such a fraught time, why it's become so politically charged. Obviously, it's just a stand-in now for leftism and Democrat politics too as well. Because that used to be the other thing, is that not that Democrats weren't obviously more friendly towards the LGBTQ people before, but it wasn't like they were absolutely the party of. And then quickly Democrats made that their thing, where every single Democrat politician went from being against gay marriage to now celebrating it. And, I think that kind of drug in the politics side, where it just became a stand-in, and the rainbow flag just became a stand-in for the religion of the left too, on the right side of things. It has more to do with things like the left using it as a cudgel to beat you into their belief system. At the same time too, the whole pronouns thing, I think, really started to turn. I think that really started to be a huge issue. The transgender issues, whether it was just kids, and then also the buying in that men really are women, the competing in women's sports by men, the using of bathrooms. It stopped being, when it was just you basically cross-dressing, walking around saying, hey, look, I don't want to be thrown in jail for this. People are like, oh, okay. But then it became them cross-dressing and now demanding you play along. And it's just, like I said, it's just no longer about just them. It starts to now involve, we have to be involved in it. And that's really created a lot of the consternation I see. But anyways, Lexington's doing Lexington Pride, obviously, month with parades and everything else. And there was a Lexington Pride restaurant week. And many of the places involved in the Lexington Pride restaurant week are kind of to be expected, right? They literally hang things out in front, like the gay flags and transgender flags out in front, like a Lucy Brown Coffee Bar, 3rd Street Stuff Coffee, West 6, for an example, Brewing. I stopped doing West 6, obviously, a long time ago, because one of the owners of West 6 is a Ben Self. And Ben Self is the former chair of the Kentucky Democrat Party. And so I wasn't going to spend my money on beer, that I was going to go ahead and have to be competing against my beer dollars when I'm out there campaigning for conservative candidates. I don't want to be fighting an opposition that I'm funding by drinking the beer I drink every night. That's a simple change I can make, to drink a beer that doesn't fund my opposition, in order to make my job easier on the ground when I'm fighting against these monies being spent. And so, but you got West 6, Bluegrass Distillers, High on Art and Coffee, Mad Mushroom, Girls Burritos. Human Being is getting involved, kind of strange. But there's one particular one that stood out to me, and that's Country Boy Brewing, the Lexington and Georgetown locations. Now let me explain though, too, this isn't just restaurants saying, here, I'll sponsor your event. like it's some sort of marketing opportunity. What's going on here is that if you visit each of these locations and ask for the Pride special, they will serve it to you, but then they donate a portion of that sale to Lexington Pride. And Lexington Pride then turns around and uses that money to not just advocate for LGBTQ rights or whatever that means, but they turn around and they use that money to actively push forward ideas and ideologies that attempt to get people elected and people that we end up working against. So donating to their cause isn't just you donating to some sort of suicide prevention hotline maybe for gay people, which is something that, if it's LGBTQ suicide prevention hotline, depending on what they're saying and what they're pushing, you could see people donating to that don't agree with the Pride push because they specifically are saying, look, I don't want them to kill themselves though, and these resources are helpful for them not to do that, then that's a fine thing for me to donate to in conjunction with like a fundraiser week. But instead, what they're actively doing here is they're donating to political action causes that use that money to facilitate and help get people elected. And what is weird about Country Boy Brewing doing this is that I always thought of Country Boy as a bit of a conservative beer brand. Now, granted, the donation history of the owners is a little different, right? They've donated to some Democrats, but more often than not, they're donating to Republicans. The Democrats they voted to is like Andrew Bashir back in the day. I think one of them donated to Rocky Atkins, but otherwise they're donating to Republicans, and on a regular basis, they do host Republican fundraisers at their location. Now, they're not, the candidates I would support. Many times they're hosting some of the more liberal, less conservative candidates, but I don't really necessarily fault the standard person for doing that. If they're going to go out there and they're going to support somebody like Damon Thayer, that's a choice they make, and it's a choice that I assume when people are doing that, they're making without knowing all the information. If they are a conservative, because they don't know, Damon Thayer's in leadership. When a bill doesn't pass, Damon Thayer's helping kill it. Like, he is a part of that process of killing good conservative pieces of legislation and watering them down and orchestrating all of that goes on. He's a huge part of that machine. And so obviously when you're supporting him, you're supporting everything that goes along that Senate leadership does wrong. And so I just assume, though, people do it because they're more than most, especially, is good at laying down the rhetoric nice and thick while making sure his actions fall short. So I don't fault them per se because, they're hosting fundraisers for people like Thayer and candidates that Thayer likes. I just assume they were confused. But now that I see, and the other thing too is that I do know some of the members of the ownership should have conservative values based upon some of the actions that they do outside of work. And also your name is Country Boy Brewing. Who do you think's drinking your beer? People who would take offense to the idea that you're over here, actively using your business to donate money to LGBTQ causes. You saw what happened to Bud Light. And it wasn't just they were donating to LGBTQ causes, they were actively sponsoring. Once again, this points to the fact that these issues around Pride is coming from more the T than the L, G, and B because of the lie that they want you to buy into that they're really this other gender. And so they're celebrating 1 year of womanhood for Dylan Mulvaney. That was buying into the lie. That really upsetted people. But you see that happening and you think you'd be more careful. And what's interesting is they haven't made a post on their social media about this at all. The only way I knew that they were involved in Pride Restaurant Week is because I read it in a newspaper article. But you go into their social medias as of now, they don't have any Pride posts. It's like they're trying to play both sides of the fence, and I don't like that. If you want to get involved in politics with your business, that's a risk you take. And when you get involved with politics, you're going to support one side and one ideas and not support the others, or you can remain politically neutral as a business and not get involved in politics at all. And if you want to argue they were being politically neutral before, when all they were doing was donating and then allowing the local politicians to hold fundraisers at their locations, that they're just saying, look, two sides of things. One, I'm a beer company. I'm a heavily regulated industry. So obviously having good relationships with my local representatives is important to me. It's a type of lobbying that I'm doing in order to get certain laws passed. I can understand that. So maybe they were never even conservative, but they know enough not to post any kind of pride messages. And if they weren't getting involved in politics before, they are now when they're using their business to actively support and fund and donate money to a political action organization. Well, Jefferson County Public Schools has a massively failing system. Less than half of their kids are proficient in reading and math. Look at the numbers. They're just not performing well. But despite all this, they've decided to commit millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars to all new sports facilities at all their schools. Interesting decision. I know everybody's got some feelings about sports for sports helping people get out of the neighborhoods and everything else. But the question becomes, should they really be spending money on this or not? We'll be digging into that after this short break. You're listening to The Andrew Cooperrider Show. If you want to reach out to the show, feel free to email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. We'll be back in a few short minutes. And you're back with The Andrew Cooperrider Show. So Jefferson County Public Schools has made an announcement about them spending tens of millions of dollars on new athletic facilities. This announcement was made this past week. Let's listen to the superintendent and director of athletics talking about this.
Happy to be out here today to celebrate what I think is long overdue here in JCPS, which is the opportunity to give our kids in JCPS, our student athletes, what they deserve, which are the same great facilities that every other district around us has had for many years.
Not only are we getting these turf fields, but as Dr. Polio said, we are going to help other sports such as track and lacrosse and soccer. So this is an opportunity for several sports to be able to play on turf fields.
I would encourage you, when you look at this facility, for instance, which has taken an incredible amount of work, if you look at the bleachers and the press box, if you look at the concession stand area, the restrooms, it is nowhere close to our neighboring districts. We will be building about 26 schools in the next 10 years. But as a part of that future state, it was also making sure our athletic facilities were top-notch as well. So I'm so excited to be standing on this football field, this natural football field, for one of the last times ever, as we now begin a 3-year process of putting down turf fields on every single one of our high schools, with the exception of a few who are getting brand new facilities. Those schools that are getting brand new facilities, in the next 4 or 5 years, we will obviously be building new athletic facilities for those schools as well.
So let me be very clear. I am acutely aware of what athletics can do for a child. Outside of, obviously health lifestyle, motivation, team building, you can keep kids off the streets. I mean, the list goes on and on, obviously. However, you have a district that says they need teachers' raises. They need more money for transportation. I mean, they can't even get kids to school. They raise your taxes every year if you live in that area. They already spend $22,000 a year a student. But they are failing. As I said before, not even half the kids are proficient in math and reading. It's a disgrace. And so you wonder, what is the actual school's job? What would actually help these kids so much better? Is it getting new, and even if you say, well, look, they need new turf fields. Okay. But remember, he's talking about them redoing bleachers and concession stands and press boxes and scoreboards. Those are all auxiliary things that, don't get me wrong, are nice, but actually don't have anything to do with a player's ability to play on that field. It's just to make the place look nice. And I get it. Sports can offer quite an opportunity to children outside of just the team building and things that I spoke about, because you could argue that, well, you can create lots of other programs that don't require them to spend, I believe they're spending, $60-70 million on these projects. I mean, you heard them. Every single high school's getting one. And so you could say, well, there's things that we could do for them that don't require that level of facilities if it's about team building. But also, I think, let's talk about football scholarships too. Let's talk about the future that these sports actually provide for these kids, right? So for football scholarships, so you have, if you play football in high school, you have a 3-ish% chance of getting a college scholarship somewhere. But the problem is, in order to qualify, of course, for a lot of those scholarships as well, you got to keep your studies up. So obviously, the fact that over half these kids don't know how to read and do math is important. If you say sports are important, it gives them a way out. Well, they can't find their way out if they can't read and do math. They still have to qualify for college. They still have to be able to get a good enough score on their ACTs to get in. And if the school ain't providing them that, it doesn't matter how nice the football field is, that player ain't going to be able to get in. Well, the vast majority of them, because of course they're applying to not necessarily D1. I'm sure a D1 school, if you're a good enough player, would make it work. Figure it out. But in 2016, this is the other thing you have to realize about the state of sports playing today, right? And the type of people that are going pro and the types of kids that are doing really well in sports at this point. And this is just the facts. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's correct. Understand that. I'm just saying these are the facts. So in 2016, there's a survey done in a few NFL locker rooms. And indications since then have shown that numbers have only led more to the point I'm trying to make, but they've only done like one locker room at a time. And so it's hard for me to look at that data and use that as a point to make to you, because I know you're just talking about one locker room. That could be a weird thing going on there. But in 2016, they surveyed several locker rooms. And they talked about a few things to do with socioeconomical status and other things. So for an example, only 10% of players in the NFL started playing at 14 or older. Okay, so only 10% or more players started playing in high school. The vast majority of players started, of course, playing middle school, elementary school. So if you don't have those auxiliary programs, your chances of getting into the NFL so much lower. Here's the other thing. The vast majority of players in the NFL came from middle income or higher income households. Even the non-white, that is how they labeled them in the study, even the non-white players in the NFL in 2016, they were 3 times more likely for their parents to have had college degrees than the general population of non-whites in America. 3 times more likely to have college degrees. And what's my point to that? Well, despite the one-off Cinderella stories you hear, the average player is coming from a pretty well-off family that can afford trainers and gym memberships and strength conditioning and private lessons, has the vehicles to get them to and from places, has a stable enough income that they're not struggling. They don't need the kid to work around the house. I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, I can tell you, my son, he does play golf. Anybody who listens to the show knows that. And he plays in the junior PGA tour, and he's pretty good, especially considering he has a dad that doesn't really play golf. But he's great. But there's a lot of kids out there that are better than him out there playing, and they're winning giant tournaments, especially when you see the statewide tournaments and the kids winning those. Their dads are very wealthy, live on golf courses a lot of times, can afford many private lessons, or their dad themselves plays golf as a professional in golf, manages golf courses. I mean, there's one dad my son plays with his son. One kid my son plays with's dad is actually a PGA player. It's just the facts that it's harder for my son to compete when they have parents that can like literally caddy them during the round, helping them line up their shots and know what they're doing wrong, compared to a dad who has somewhat of knowledge, but not nearly the amount these people do. Is it fair? No, but it's the facts. And for those Cinderella stories having an old press box or old bleachers or old whatever, it isn't going to make a difference really to if they get recruited into a college, recruited into an NFL. You know, as long as they've got a field that is works and they can stand out on, that's all that matters. So they're doing these things in order to make the schools. Why are they doing these then? If their main job is to educate and teach kids to do reading and math and all these other things, why do they care so much about the press box and the concession stand out there at the stadiums? And this is why. These are things that the school district is doing so they can feel better about themselves. Because if it was about what's best for the kids, there's a lot of great arguments we can make that $80 million would be better spent getting more kids to read and do math than it would be spent on a new concession stands at every single high school. However, though, This is assuming the basic fact that Jefferson County schools is actually underfunded. Because we hear from the teachers and the Democrats all the time, you just need to put more money into education. More money into education, that's the secret. We just need more money, and now suddenly we'll be able to teach kids to do math or reading. But they know they actually can't solve this with money. This is obvious and clear. Because if you said, we can get kids to read and do math for this amount of money, you would never be dropping dollars into football fields. Instead, you'd be spending your money on getting more kids to read and do math. But they know money can't solve it. It's hard to teach a kid to read and do math. It takes patience and systems and teachers, and they don't want to pay the teachers what they need to. They'd rather, that's too hard, that's too difficult, because then they got to take money away from administration and money away from things like new football fields, and those things make them feel proud. Instead, they say, we're going to be good at things that are easy for us to obtain. Things like, we have a diverse staff. That's easy for us to attain. Things like we have nice facilities. Anything that doesn't actually involve the hard work of teaching a child, that's what JCPS is going to focus on excelling at in order to make their parents proud, because they cannot make them proud with what they're doing in the classroom. Well, y'all, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I thank you all so much for joining me. We'll be back here tomorrow. I hope you have a great rest of your day.